Well, kia ora tātou. While we're getting set up, I'll just like to say thank you very much to Environment Southland for hosting us today. And thank you very much to Neil and all the other people whose hard work you haven't seen because everything's gone perfectly. I organise events myself, and basically if what you've done is invisible, you've done a really good job, so well done. Thank you so much. So I'm from the Ministry for the Environment, and what I'm going to cover today is a little bit about where we've come from as an organisation, where we're going, what we're doing now, which a few other people have talked about as well, and also possibly what we're looking out for in the future. I recall I'm actually supposed to be talking about governance as well, so I'll try and do a little bit of that on the way. And I need to not get my buttons mixed up. So this is what you might imagine my world is a little bit like. This is what I'm used to mainly do. So I've come from more of an open data background. I actually trained as a molecular biologist. This is my possibly second or third career. So I was trained in data mining before data mining was a thing, using open genome data from GenBank. But also I was working actually at the Truffle Group in Plant and Food, back when there's Plant and Food, in a very commercial group where everything was commercially sensitive, everything was completely locked down. We had to ask volunteers to sign commercial sensitivity arrangements before we could let them in a vehicle. So quite a contrast. And I guess my main interest is systems working well. I'm interested in making systems better and figuring that out. I'm also probably more interested in data management as a whole rather than purely open data, so it becomes more of a all data well managed, some data open. So basically we started back MUFA opening up a database in 2009, the Land Cover database, which now resides with Landcare Research. So we did this because we got sick of writing DVDs, basically. So in a couple of chance conversations at, believe it or not, at a conference, probably possibly a little bit like this one. So somebody spoke to Nat Talkington about Creative Commons licenses. This was a little ahead or around about the same time as NZ Goal was being developed. And then another chance conversation led us to the actual way we could share our data. That was Ed Corkery from Coordinates. So Ed had developed a open source based geospatial data publishing portal. And we were, I think, possibly the first or one of their very early government clients, and they've gone on to great things since then. And this data has been reused a lot, everything from being used as in an aviation simulated game. So somebody wrote to us and said, hey, can we use your stuff? And we said, yeah, sure, it's CC BY, just go and use it. And then I'm not sure if it was this database or possibly Lens, somebody actually used it. They had about 48 hours, maybe 24 hours to calculate how long it would take to dig ditches for broadband, because they were subcontracting to one of the broadband providers. And so they actually managed to have some kind of estimate from there. So then fast forward to 2011, when we were doing our contracting, people have mentioned contracting, provision of data when we were on your purchasing services. We started to write this into when we were buying research data because we got sick of spending a lot of months negotiating IP clauses in our contracts. So we standardised them, said, righto, we own this stuff. We can license it back to you, but you need to provide it to us under CC BY. So we're not having to purchase it multiple times if we need it, so that other people can use it if they need to as well. And then so just this year's been a pretty busy year on the data front. We relaunched, I guess, our MUFA data service, so going from original Coordinates software to one that was based on the LINS data service improvements in March, and then the environmental reporting data, which is actually most of you guys' data, so thanks. Seriously, was released just last week and just after the announcement. So this is all CC BY. This all has Dublin Core or ANZLIC metadata. which I'll talk about in a bit. This all has persistent, unique identifiers, URIs, and it's all available in machine-readable format using APIs. So this was a lot of work, but we're really pleased we got there. Still a few geospatial data sets to come due to resource constraints of just getting the thing done last week, but we're really pleased this is here. And just wanted to add that, so who hates metadata? Yeah, I'm with you guys. It's one of these things that's really important, that's a complete pain in the ass. But we actually developed guidance this year to help us get through the latest data release, which I'm actually happy to share to people. We bought it CC BY so we can share it with anybody. So if anybody's actually wanting to implement metadata standards and doesn't quite know where to start, it's a good place to start. It also gets into some of these provenance issues that we're speaking about. So while everybody hates it, it is actually kind of important. So I hope everybody's had a chance to look at this. This is our Environment Aotearoa 2015. So this is your data, guys. Thanks for giving us your data. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all the people who got the data requests this year, who was so helpful with all our various requests, on top of other statutory requirements like water metering data needing to come in. And I think there's a few other ones in there. So thank you very much. This is your data. This is partially your report, so we really appreciate it. And also said this to Sean last night, currently LAWA's saving us, I think, about 6 weeks' time in processing time, which is pretty remarkable, actually. So Neil wanted me to speak briefly about the environmental reporting framework, which I will do very briefly. It is a change in the way we have done things from previous environmental reports. So it's moving from what was previously more of a snapshot approach to the pressure state impact framework. And that basically, so the state, what it's like, the pressures that have created the state or influence the state, and the way the state of the environment influences other things. And basically where Statistics NZ comes in is firstly it's done under the Tier 1 procedures and protocols under the Statistics Act, which basically mean everything is kept within the project team until time of release, so nobody has any special favours of getting data early, including ministers, which is interesting sometimes. And so the criteria look like this. So they're looking at relevance, accuracy, timeliness, accessibility, coherence and consistency, and interpretability. And if you're looking for the actual details of which topics and various things, that's up on the Statistics NZ website. We released that earlier this year. And I guess we've just had this major report come out, which has been a huge amount of work from a lot of people. So what happens next? Oh, actually, and some of this is actually already happening, as we've heard today, so this is wonderful. So we don't collect data. MUFA doesn't collect pretty much any data of itself. We rely on other people pretty much all the time. So we need to work as we are through EMR&Ms and LAWA, through the NRS and through other agencies to hopefully once again make the system better for everybody. So we're not bothering people with multiple data requests, and we're able to basically meet our obligations. We're very interested in standards. Already looking at quality improvements. So there's not necessarily any easy magic answer to this, unfortunately. The things we're looking at are quality, consistency, comparability and representativeness of data. And then also we need systems that can serve what we're trying to do. So this comes in provenance, which I've mentioned already. So what's happened, where's the data come from, what's happened to it. Access, can we get it, who can access it, and when and how. Can we find it, and how timely is it? So I get to talk about NEMS, which is wonderful. So NEMS, I'm on the NEMS steering group, so I am a NEMS guy, as they tell me now. So NEMS is about environmental monitoring consistency. So apparently most people used to do things the same around about in the 1970s, and we've obviously, what's the word, down, opposite of evolution, devolved since then, responsibilities. So NEMS is basically about getting the people who do the work together. So these are our technical experts who are out there, putting meters in, doing the work to agree from their community what is the best standard to follow. Often standards are thought about and dreamt up in ivory towers by someone, and they don't get implemented, or people decide to make a new standard which doesn't help, basically. Sean's very nicely covered the quality coding system, so I don't need to go in that, but that is a major part of NEMS. And I guess the important thing there to realise is that nobody's expecting perfect QC 600 off the bat. It's basically about saying, here we are now, here's where we want to be, but when we look at this data, we know what that quality is roughly. And Tasman's written a nice little paper if anybody's interested about what their data is like. So I'm happy to share that with people. And it's also governed in partnership. So this is a joint project between local government, LIWA, NIWA, and now Landcare and GNS as well, and MUFA. And basically it's a group of people who get things done, getting things done, and that is rare and special, and we need to support them. Mike is in the room. Mike has worked very hard on actually developing and implementing a unit standard, so people can now get trained in NEMS, which is fabulous. I think that's just about ready to go now. Taking enrolments if anybody's interested. And we've also, people have talked about standards, but let's talk about open standards. So NEMS standards are open standards based on open standards. So open standards are free, no cost. They are licensed to be reusable, and they're readily available. I think that's the three things. So these are standards based generally on existing standards. They're not dreamed up out of nowhere. They're based on often relatively small tweaks depending on the standard from existing standards, including OGC, USGS and WMO. So here's a bunch of jargon for you. Doesn't this sound like the sort of thing that your organisation would be interested in? Isn't this the sort of thing that you hear people talk about on a TED talk and you think, wow, if only we could do that, wouldn't that be amazing? Delivering added value for ratepayers and staff and other stakeholders, data-driven decision making, fabulous. Well, guess what? That's pretty much LAWA. Took a little bit of liberty with the Internet of Things, but really nobody knows what the Internet of Things actually means, so I feel quite happy to take that liberty. So I think also it's just amazing we have come so far really so quickly. So thanks to everybody who has been involved and driving that project and contributing to that project. So full credit to y'all, it's great. And this has been talked about, so I don't need to talk about LAWA. So, and I apologise for the slide, it's probably completely unreadable. However, this is what I get to do now. So basically I get, because we're being driven essentially by EMA, and EMA is as Caroline mentioned, is the umbrella which covers this partnership and covers the two projects, NEMS and Lawandi. We are being driven by you guys to do better. So, and it's quite an interesting place to be, saying, well, actually, regional councils aren't going to let us get away of requesting Excel files for very much longer. We're actually going to have to, woman up and start using standard queries rather than asking for Excel files. So that's going to be interesting for us. We're also needing to basically be able to fulfil our statutory obligations. Wanting to move more into an evidence-based policy space where policy analysts can access and use and show their working when developing policy. What else are we after? I guess this is very much a people as well as an ICT solution. It's all very well to have a technology solution, but if you ain't got the people, you're not going to get anywhere, I'm afraid, in my view. And it's also about supporting our people to do better in what they're doing already and the increasing demands that are being placed on them. Governance is obviously a big thing here. We have a lot of little fiefdoms, as many organisations do, that have managed to get funding for a thing. Give us 30k to implement essentially a BI system that was based on logistics. That is actually, once we rolled out the pilot, we found that it was actually really only useful for a couple of people. So at least trying to have some all of organisation view, so we're not doing lots of little things and not really getting anywhere. I guess the other principles being that we'll be using shared services wherever possible and using infrastructure as a service, so that's that cloud-based, being able to buy only as much as we need and then scale up if we need to. And I guess this is everything from right through from point of receiving data through any analytical or analysis projects, visualization, and then publishing as well, which actually is the next slide, so I can talk about it in the next slide. Making sure I change both at the same time. So once again, this is another thing you can't read, so I'll describe it for you. So this is my ideal. So this is where basically the whole system works, right from you guys and the CRIs through to us. Data comes in, and it's we know what the quality is like because it's collected as an M standard. We're using these OGC services, web services, so you're not having to send us Excel files, and we're not having to make X number of data requests per year. We have standardised queries, so we can all do the same thing where we can. So I'm not having to have people write a bunch of code when somebody in a council's already written a bunch of code to do that. We need to sort our data storage systems out, but that's something for us to do. Having both industry standard analysis tools as well as things that a policy analyst might be able to use. There's an organisation called Figure NZ, which has got some really interesting products and services in this space. And also, I think we're starting to do this already, but sharing how we do the analysis. So if I do a particular transformation and a particular statistical analysis, I want to be able to say, so perhaps that's using something like R, here's what I did. So people can possibly review that code, tell me what's wrong with it, or even use it themselves. And these are becoming more common practices in the open and reusable research fields. So this is not necessarily new, but it is new, I guess new for government in some ways. There are already existing repositories called the likes of GitHub that we can use. We're not having to build much of this stuff ourselves. What else have we got? Yes, so this is something what I mentioned. Once again, looking to reproducible research, people were asking, how can we track the usage of our data? How do we know who's using it and how they're using it? So this is just starting to emerge through the use of digital object identifiers, persistent identifiers, both for, say, like a data set or an organisation or an individual, and basically being able to link all these, as they're called, research artefacts in time, give credit where credit is due. So, for example, I might not, at the moment, councils are credited in the metadata on our service. Wouldn't it be nice if we could, have the information going back to them about how their data is being used? So then that's integrated back into some kind of asset management model where we know what the really valuable data sets are, and the demand data sets in demand and the ones in less demand. This was something I was speaking about to Sean about last night, is that if we are going to manage data as an asset, we need some kind of way of making that real for our financial managers and our CEs. So how can we have a data asset management model that actually makes sense? Do we have to discuss starting to charge for data? since, our other option is to do budget bids or raise rates or things that actually really aren't palatable for us. And how do we do that in a way where we're still getting the people the data they need, but still being able to maintain those services and infrastructure we need? I think this is something we need to talk about. I'm for freely available and free data as much as any other person, but I also recognise the reality of the situation we're in. And obviously we're wanting good metadata, so we know what the provenance of data is. And we have useful web services so people can just get all the data they need when they need it. So this is ideal. I think we're close in some places, less close in others. So this is actually not a gripe, folks. This is, I guess, just the reality of being an open data organisation. So it took a long time, because under the current Copyright Act, we actually have to get written permission from all you guys to use your data and to receive by licenses. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. I wish there was, but that was a lot of time, and it was completely worth it, but it is a bunch of time to get that done. So this is not a gripe, it's just a demonstration of some of the time that's involved in doing some of this work. So I just wanted to, I guess, lift this up a level. So this is some work I was doing with the Lincoln Hub based at the Lincoln Science Centre. So I've just pulled these out of their, I guess, still in draft, their data management plan. We're talking about what they might like to do for their data management. These should be completely uncontroversial, but I'll just whip through them anyway. So data managed as an asset, data is well managed. Agreed open standards, and I guess this one is, which I was talking about with the DOIs, that we can actually, data is an output or a metric, so we can actually report against it, which would be ideal. And data is, I don't think we've talked about archiving or preservation today, but there is, and this is another very interesting question about digital preservation of data and how much of that we should be doing. And ideally, you'd also want tools and expertise is shared. And then this is basically from the data and information management principles that Paul talked about, so I won't go through that. I'll just stop talking soon. And these were just some of the things I was musing about, which might be slightly less relevant, so I won't spend too much time on them. But data isn't Excel anymore, and this is something that our organisation is going to have to get to grips with really quickly. Hopefully yours are already beyond that. I think we still think of data as Excel, and it's too big and too ugly and too messy to be useful in Excel anymore. I think data storage used to be the bottleneck, but I think now major problem now is going to be transferring data from place to place, from organisation to organisation. Data is for machines. Don't need to cover that, people talk about that. Your data is really special, but it's not unique, so you probably don't need to build a new thing to be able to handle it. Eventually, we're not quite there yet, I don't think we're going to have a problem in many places with data quantity. But data quality is going to be the harder nut to crack, because that's something that has to happen right throughout your data management workflow or anything. It doesn't happen magically at the end, as I said. I think if we are lucky, some of our more expensive data will get cheaper due to better techniques, better diagnostic tools. And I think we will. We're not quite there yet with digital identifiers. I keep asking the people who know, so when are we going to be there? When can we have this system where we can have data citation, where I know where and how people are using it, so I can have my proper return on the investment? I think we're close. And that's something that needs to be, is actually yet another standard to take care of. What have I got? This one's especially for Vin. So this is, people talk about the wisdom of crowds, which was another one of these buzzy things. So this is the wisdom of taxi drivers. Data management's like golf, right? Sure. So many things to think about at once, but you can only concentrate on one thing at a time. And I guess what I see as my job, and I think many of the people's room job is as well, is that we need to try and take care of all of those 30 to 60 to hundreds of things so that our organisations can actually focus on the things that they need to focus on. That's delivering value or benefit for our communities, fulfilling our obligations and the like. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Hey, listen. Regarding the digital identifier system,
Yeah.
I know there's been done work around the world, like in different places. Just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
does it have to be a national system, like only for New Zealand?
That is a good question. It could be, we could probably use one of the international systems. I think the main thing is they need to be minted. They need to be minted, and there are different minting systems. Is that right, David? Yeah, David might be able to comment on this as well. So yes, you are correct. We don't necessarily need to make our own one, but we probably need to decide which one we might usefully use. Did you want to say anything about that? Well, not really, or sorry.
It's the way to go to link the publications and so on back to the data, and that's where some of the CRIs are already starting to look. We have DRIs on the data that we put into CCAN now, and it's interesting. It's been demanded by the scientists because they're publishing their data, journal articles, and they need to be able to link back because that's what the journals are asking. But yeah, we use an international minting. Yeah, and it's very cheap. It's very cheap to mint. What you have to avoid is trying to change it, because if you change it, it becomes very expensive. So these are like numbers that are attached to your data. Think of it like an ISBN on a book or something. Yes, it is. So you can uniquely identify any data set or sub-data set you've published.
Thank you. Cool. All done. Thank you.